Zok the Heilige Gemara. Tanu Rabbanim. We're all the way at the second to the last line on Daf Tezayin and base. Tanu Rabbanim. Ketzad miraktin lifnei akal. How does one dance in front of a kal? Rashi says, what does Ketzad miraktin means? Ma oimrim lefaneh. So Rashi seems to learn that the mitzvah of rikud is the mitzvah of speaking. The question is, why is it that speaking is referred to with the word dancing? There are other Rishonim who learn that there's two mitzvahs. There's a mitzvah of rikud, of dancing, and there's also a mitzvah of dibur, of saying nice things. I once heard over from Shiafir that dancing by a chasana helps you raveris become mochel, because it says mirak din. Mirak means to clean. Din is din. So how do you clean away your averis? By dancing in front of a kala. So what are the words that are supposed to be used? Oh, but before we go there, why is the question ketzad miraktin lifnei akala? Do we not have to dance in front of a chassan as well? And Rabbi Chanan Wasserman Zatzal asks, more than that, the mitzvah of getting married in a pur revu is primarily on the man. So why is it ketzad miraktin lifnei akala? It should be ketzad miraktin lifnei chassan. So what most people say is when you're mishabeach the kala, so that makes the chassan happy that he got a good kala. So that's why the way to be mesameach the chassan is specifically by being mesameach the kala. Beishamai says the way you're mesameach the kala is saying kala kamoishahi. You have to describe the kala the way she really is. Like Rashi says, Yosy, according to how beautiful she is, the chashivusa, and the chashivi she is, that's how your makala says. Tosfos elaborates, and if she actually has a problem, yishtaku v'lo yishabchuha, don't say anything at all. Inami yishabchuha b'davar no sheyeshba. Find another feature that she has that is praiseworthy. Kagain beina, she has beautiful eyes, or beyada, she has beautiful hands. Im heim yafos, if in fact they are true. Basil said no. Kala no v'chasuda. You always have to say that she's wonderful. Tosfos explains, you have to be totally mishabecher. If you only say she has beautiful hands, well, obviously people are going to realize, and she's going to be embarrassed, and she's going to say, yeah, because everything else is ugly. It's like a woman who's looking in a mirror and saying, oh, yeah, I look terrible, I have wrinkles, I have pimples, I'm terrible. And her husband tells her, at least your eyes work. That's not exactly a compliment, Basil. And therefore, Basil says, no matter what, you should say, Kala no v'chasuda. And Rashi explains, you're not lying. It's chut shel chesed mashach halal. Beauty isn't just physical beauty. There's other beautiful things about her. Her beautiful family she might have. She might have beautiful midah. She might have beautiful mitzvahs. So it's not exactly a lie. Amrlan Beishamai leBasil, Hareisha Haisa Chigeres, Oisuma. If she was a Chigeres, she was hingadik. Oisuma, or if she was blind. Oimrim La, Kala No V'Chasuda. Agitavach. Would you say that she's a Kala No V'Chasuda? That would be a lie. V'Torah Amra, the Torah says, Midvar Sheker Tircha. So how could you say something that's false? So interesting enough, what's Basil going to do with that? What's Basil going to do with that? Basil holds that it's not exactly a sheker. It's not exactly a sheker. It's speaking about other things. So Shammai's tiny is, it doesn't say mi sheker tercha. It says mi devar sheker tercha. Even if it's a little bit of a sheker, you should not say it. So Amalam Beisila Beishamai, are you telling me you're never allowed to lie? According to you, you're not allowed to lie by a kala. If someone ended up buying something that was not a good deal, or should you be mishabechet, or you should criticize it? So you see, sometimes you're not supposed to say the truth. From here, the Chachamim said, "La'olam tehei daita shel adam u'reves and abriyas." A person should always be mu'rev and abriyas. And the pasuk that pshat is that even though something's not so perfect, you should compliment somebody anyway. But there's a shita in the Rishonim who learns that a person should always be mu'rev and abriyas, so other people will say nice about him, even though maybe he's not so perfect. There's actually a shayla in the Rishonim. What is the issue of mitvah sheker tircha? Because there are those who learn that if it doesn't cause any damage to a person, when you lie to him, there is no issue mitvah sheker tircha. This is the Sefer Yereim. So the Chayim are masber that according to the Sefer Yereim, here you're being mazik the chassan by being going of das, by telling him something that's not true, and that's being mazik. So in fact, sheker would be awesome. So going back to what I said before, Ketzad Meraktim L'fnei Hakala, if that's only referring to Dibur, like Rashi says, why is the word Meraktim used? And the answer that I saw is because sometimes you have to dance around the truth a little bit. You can't say it exactly the way it is. You have to, even with your words, you got to dance around to highlight the milas of the Kala. So there's a very interesting halacha. It says Ketzad Meraktim L'fnei Hakala. It doesn't say Ketzad Meraktim im hakala. You dance with the kala. You dance in front of the kala. So there's a Pesach Tshuva that brings down the Toras Chaim in Siman Samach Sif Aleph, which is where the Shulchan Aruch discusses this halacha of Ketzad Meraktim Fnei Hakala. He says there's a minig by certain Talmidei Chachamim that they dance with the kala, and even though they don't directly hold their hands, they have a shmat in between them. It's a horrible, horrible thing that they do, and they're not allowed to dance by holding the kala's hands. And he brings a raya. It says Ketzad Meraktim L'fnei Hakala, not im hakala. So I'm not sure what exactly that Toras Chaim is referring to. The Pashas, I would say, it's speaking about a mitzvah, but it says even if they have a shmata in between their hand and the kala's hand, so that could be with a type of glove. A gartel is completely disconnected. So I don't know, but I have to look. This is the tshuva that the Pesach Tshuva brings out from Toras Chaim. I'd be very curious to look up the tshuvas that speak about mitzvahs, because there's a huge makor. But the Chassidim, they do mitzvahs. So I'm actually going to later try.
Man tat es Chassen, habe ich gesehen a picture, wie man älter Seite hat getanzt mit der Tichel, mit der napkin. Yeah.
So you see, that's a minute. So the Pesach Tshuva only brings down the tzad that you're not allowed. I'd like to see where the other tshuvas are. I'm sure there's a lot of tshuvas about it, and I hope I can find them. Zok the Gemara.
Zemenshka Gairim and Zemenshka Balachiv.
Kiyasu Rabdini Amar Hachi. He said the following: Mishri Kama Khalsa Hachi Mishri Kama Khalsa b'Marok. This is what they used to sing in front of the Kala in Morocco. Loy Kechal, she doesn't need eyeshadow. V'loy Sirak, and she doesn't need blush. V'loy Pirchus, and she doesn't need to make her hair. V'yalas Chain, and she still has Chain. She's so beautiful, she doesn't need any type of makeup. And there are those who learn that's pshat in Beishamai's words of Kala Kamoishahi, meaning the Kala, the way she is, she's beautiful. She doesn't need any type of paint or wallpaper. She's beautiful the way she is. Ki samchu Rabbanan leRab Zera, when the Rabbanan gave smicha to Rab Zera, Shara lehachi, they sang for him as well. And they sang for him, Loy Kechal, V'loy Tzarak, V'loy Pirchis, V'yalas Chain, which is very interesting, because last I checked, Rab Zera was a man. So what's pshat that they were saying he didn't need makeup? So there's what the Mefarshim explain is the Reb Zera was not a very good-looking man. He was misagib himself with sigufim, with fasts. He was dark. So they were saying several different things. They were saying is even though he doesn't look like he has a huge hundred upon him, but his toicha, his real self, is really very, very beautiful. He might not look so beautiful, but he's very beautiful.
And could also mean that ich gedarf keinem Ziereden, ich gedarf keinem Kampfenen, Loy Kechal V'loy Shirak.
The other shot is that it's Toichi Kabara. He's never going to act one way in public and one way in private. He's going to uphold the din of the Torah, and he's not going to be influenced like Reb Chaim is saying. Doesn't have to lecture to anybody. He's going to stick to the emes. That was the other shot that I saw. And the third shot that I saw was that even though he doesn't dress fancy, doesn't act fancy, but he's someone who's totally dovuk in the Rebbeinu Shalom. He's the type of Rav who should be very happy with. Kisam Rabbanan Rabami Rabasi, when the Rabbanan gave smicha to Rabami and Rabasi, Shori Luhu Hachi. This is what they sang for him. Kol Min Dain v'Chol Min Dain Samuchulana. Azelach and Yidin. Such people should get smicha. But Loi Sizmuchu Lana, don't give smicha for us. Loi Min Sarmisin, which Rashi teaches as someone who doesn't explain things properly. Fakert Misarshim Alochas Behepech Lemed. He explains things wrong. Sarmitin, which Rashi says smartut and shmatus. In other words, he doesn't explain it well. He messes it up. V'amila loimin chamisin, which Rashi says he doesn't explain it fully. He only explains a fifth at a time. He doesn't explain things thoroughly and clearly. V'loimin termisin, which Rashi says lo yisparish. Rashi says I don't know what pshat is, but there are those who say termisin means anoshim reikim, not people who are good erlich people. It should be chashav yidin are the only types of people should get smicha. Rabbi Vo ki have osim misifta lebekeser. Rabbi Vo was a yid who had a shine that clashed upon him. Rashi tells us that the Gemara says he was ka'en the beauty of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan was unbelievably beautiful. So Rabbi Vo was an unbelievably beautiful person, and he was literally Moshe Nefesh because he wanted to sit and learn by the Gemara. But when he had to, he sacrificed some of his learning to go be mishtadel in Yonei Tzibur. So when he would leave his besmedrash to go to the Kesar, because he had to do some kahalish work, Nafkon Amasa de Kesar Lape, the maidservants of the king's household would greet him. Umashrin Lehachi, and they would sing for him as follows: Rabbi Da'ameh, he's the Rav, he's the leader of his folk, of his stada. Nasi Ba'ameh, Rashi says. And he's their spokesman. Rashi says it means a manik. He's their manik. Butzina de Nahira. He's like a shot of light, and that's referring to his beauty. Baruch Masich L'Shlam. Gebench der Rebbeinu Shalom, who brought you here in peace. Amru Olav al Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi. They used to say about Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi, "Shal Yenotel Bad Shal Hadas." He would take a bad, a stem of the Hadas, Umeraked Lefnei Akala. And the Rishonim tell us that what was the purpose of this bat? It's to remind us about Esther and Malka. Esther and Malka brought down that she was green. She wasn't so physically beautiful, but she had a special chen. She was nova chasudo. She had chen. So that's what Rabbi Yehuda Bar Eloi was saying. I'm saying she's nova chasudo. Don't tell me that I'm a shakrin. I have the bat here to remind us of Esther. On Esther, we also said Kalanoa v'chasuda, and it's the emes. It's the emes because she's beautiful because of her chen. Rabbi Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak meraket atlas. So Rashi says he used to juggle 3 hadasim, but there are those who say then it should have said meraket bitlas. What's up atlas? So they learned that Shmuel bar Yitzchak used to dance so lebendig by a chasna. He danced like for 3 people. And Omar Reb Zera told him, "Come michsef lon saba. You're embarrassing us." How is that? Rashi says, "Michsef lon saba shemizalzel b'kovet talmidei chachamim." You're being mizalzel when you're covered. V'noye kalas roish ba'atzma. So either he felt that juggling isn't appropriate, or dancing very like 3 bachim maybe was not appropriate. But kinach nafshe, when Reb Shmuel bar Yitzchak died, there was a clear sign that in fact what he did was 100% correct. Ifsik amuda denura bein didei l'chula am. There was like a wall of fire that separated between his mita and the tzibur. The gemiri, and we know the Kabbalah, the ifsik amuda denura ela ilachad bedara ila trei bedara. We know that such a thing only happens to 1 or 2 people in a generation. So clearly, what Reb Shmuel bar Yitzchak did was the right thing, because he was yochid b'doyrei, that he was zoicha to have ifsek amuda denura. The question is, how did they know that it was this schus that he had amuda denura? Maybe it was something else. So the Rishonim are masber that the amud of fire was actually in the shape of a hadas. So it was clear that it was his rikud lefnei akala that earned him this special status. Amar Reb Zera said, "Hanilei shutise means the stem of the hados l'saba." That helped Reb Shmuel bar Yitzchak. V'ramilo shtuse l'saba. The fact was that Tzachba nourished either by juggling or by dancing super lebedik. That's what got him the schus. Say l'saba, or maybe his shita, meaning he paskin like Beis Hillel, that you say kala nova chasuda no matter what. Now the Chasam Sofer is medayik from the fact that it says gemiri. If everybody saw in every generation someone with fire, then it would be obvious to everybody that it only happened once or twice in this generation. But it says Gemiri, we know the Kabbalah that that's the way it is. Why do you need to know the Kabbalah? From in every generation, they saw one person with fire. The average person was not able to see this fire. Only very the Herben Eden. And I believe this week is the Yortzeit of Rav Moshe Cordovero. Is that true, Chaim? I think this week is the Yortzeit of Rav Moshe Cordovero. What?
The time of the
I don't even know who Rav Moshe Cordovero was, but he was Adam Gadol.
He was one of big Makabulim.
So he was around in the time of the Arizal.
He was before that.
So the Arizal was by his Levi. But when the Arizal was by his Levi, he wasn't the Arizal. He was just the Ari plain. And the Ari said, and it's brought down that the Ari saw an Amud Denura, this fire he saw by the Mita of Rav Moshe Cordovero, and one child who was too young to ever see Carrie, he also saw it, but nobody else saw it. Okay, Zog the Gemara weiter. Rabbi Acha, Mark of Lakasvei. He would put the kala on his shoulders. And there are those who say that Avada, she wasn't touching him. It means he lifted up her chair on his shoulders. Umuraket, and he would dance that way. Amrulei Rabbana. The Rabbanan told Rabbi Acha, Anan Ma'alim Everapi. Should we also pick up kalas and put them on our shoulders? Amrlahu, only if you're on a very high madrega. Idamian alaychu kikshura. If you look at them like they're a piece of wood, like a board. In other words, they don't cause any taiva in you. They don't lead you to have machshavas rois. Then lachi, then you could. But v'loy loy. So that basically excludes everybody. Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani Amar B'Yonasan muter listakel b'fnei kala kol shiva k'dei lechavev al bayit. You're allowed to look at a kala the whole week of Sheva Brachos, because when the chazan sees people looking at his kala, he'll feel good. Oh, she's very beautiful. But the last Avada, it's also to look at a woman, and it's also to look at a kala, even the first day. So the Rishonim asked if it's also to look at a kala. We learned in the Mishnah earlier that how could we prove that this woman was a basula if she went out with her hair down, if she had a special hinuma. If you're not allowed to look at the kala, how could you possibly know that? So the Rishonim have different roots. One that they say is you don't have to see the kala wearing the hinuma. You could see it on the table, and you could ask, "Who is this for?" And they'll say it's for the kala. That's one thing that the Rishonim answer. Another thing that they answer is, yeah, you're allowed to look at the hinuma. You're not allowed to look at her, but you're allowed to look at her tachshitin. There's actually a shaila lalach if you're allowed to look at her tachshitin. Okay, and the third shot was you're not allowed to look. You could notice, you could see things, but you're not allowed to stare. You're not allowed to focus. Tana Rabbanan, ma'avirin is a mace milufnei akala. Akala gets the right of way, so even a mace has to move out of the way to make way for the kala. V'zeh milufnei melech Yisrael, and sai a mace and sai akala they have to make way for a melech Yisrael. Amr level Agrippas hamelech. They said about Agrippas hamelech she'avar milufnei kala. He actually gave the kala the right of way. V'shabchu chachamim, and they were mishabeichem. Shabchu, if they were mishabeichem, michlal the shaper. It must be that he did the right thing. V'ha'amar Rabashi afilu l'man da'amar nosi shemachal al kavoidei kvoidei machol melech shemalach al kavoidei ein kvoidei machol. A king cannot be mochel is covered. It's not his covered. It's the covered of the tzibur. He cannot be mochel is covered. So what right did Agrippas have to show right away to the kala? The Omar Mar, because it says, because Mar said, Soim Tosim Alecha Melech. There's multiple Simosh Rashi says. Soim Tosim. There's multiple placements upon you a Melech. So we learn not only do you have to have a Melech, but you also need Shetehei a Masay Alecha. You always have to fear the king. In other words, he gets the right away. But if it was obvious that he was deferring the right away to the kala, that would have been wrong. But what happened was is he was approaching a fork in the road. He was going to go to the left, and the Kala was going to the left. He turned to the right. So nobody knew that he was deferring to the Kala. It looked like he was just headed in that direction. That's not a Pchisus Kavod to the Melech, and that's what they were Mishabeach, Agrippas HaMelech. Tan Rabbanon, Mivatlan Talmud Torah Latzos HaMeis. You're allowed to be Mivatlan Talmud Torah for Latzos HaMeis. Ulech Nosas Kala. Amr Alav Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Loi. Show you Mivatlan Talmud Torah Latzos HaMeis. Ulech Nosas Kala. When do you say that you are allowed to be Mevatel Torah for Tzos Chasim Kala? That's Kishain Imoi Kal Tzorka. That if the mace or the Kala does not have enough of an entourage. Aval Yesh Imoi Kal Tzorka, if there is enough of an entourage, Ein Mevatel. The Chama Kal Tzorka, what is considered enough of an entourage? Amar Shmuel Bar Ini Mishmei Derab, Tracer Alpha Gavre, 12,000 people, Vishita Alpha Shipure, and 6,000 people blowing the shofar to announce the arrival of the chassan of the mace. So this is a big item. Basically, everybody has to be mevatel Talmud Torah for achanosas kalam for tzos mace. And there are those who say it's a total of 12,000, but 6 of those 12 are the announcers. Ula said, you know how many people? Could go in the chaytzi gavri me'avula batzifra. By levaya, there has to be enough people to stretch, for us to have a solid wall of people from the exit of the city up until the basic forest. That's how many people there needs to be. When the Torah is taken away from us, meaning the Yid who's soaked in Torah, when we take him away, when the Rebbeinu takes him back, takes his neshama back, you need as many people there as there was Knesinosa when the Torah was given. Man Nesinosa, just like on Har Sinai when the Rebbeinu Shalom gave Klal Yisrael the Torah, B'Shishim Riboy, there were 600,000 people. Afnitilosa B'Shishim Riboy. But V'Hanimili L'man Dekori B'Toni Avoloy Shimesh. That's someone who learned Torah and Mishnah, but he never taught V'Loy Shana, but he never taught Talmidim. But he had to have learned Kol Torah Kula. But if he didn't, then he doesn't need so many. And let me just turn over the daf. But someone who even taught Talmidim, less Shiura, there it's unlimited. And Tosfos speaks out something very, very important. If someone didn't learn Torah nor Mishnah, then ein nevatlim im yeshlem is asking kedei kfura. If he has enough people to deal with the kfura, and the Rishonim say that means 10 people, then you don't need more than 10 people. But someone who learned Torah and Mishnayos, which includes most Yidden, you need up to maybe even 12,000, 18,000, 6,000, 600,000. There's tons of people that you need. And someone who taught Torah, that's unlimited.
That taught, nicht gelernt.
No. Leman de Masni, less Lishiura. But Leman de Kari, Vitani, that's a limit. A limit of 18,000, of 12,000, of 600,000. That's a limit. But Leman de Masni, less Lishiura, even more than that. The shaila is, what about an Eishes Talmud Chacham? So on the one hand, you say, because they assist their husbands in learning, so maybe they should have the din of a Talmud Chacham, you should also have that. I believe most poskim say that you only need a minion, even for an Eishes Talmud Chacham. V'im yesh edim shel yotza b'inu.
Asura steht nicht so.
Wo steht?
Bei Asura öfter, weil sie ist allein gewesen, weil sie hat gelernt, man vermacht alle Geschäfte, ja? Asura meinen.
It doesn't mean there was a chiyuv. It means that's what happened. People felt connected.
No, maybe because she was alone. She was not only Aisha's Chavis, she was allein at Ebbets. Steht as Magayedes, nein?
Could be. You know, listen, there was once a Ruv in the city, and his wife was really, it was a lady, but his wife was really the Ruv of the Besmedrish. Someone told me I done but only Chassidus of Besmedrish with a lady rabbi. So she was the Ruv. So quickly for her, there had to be a big Levaya. Okay.
Sie gewähnen ein paar Ebbets, nicht bei den Jiden. Dweire gewähnen Ebbets.
Yeah. So we said earlier in the Mishnah that if she had Edom that she was Yotza B'Hinuma, that proves that she was a Psula, and therefore she's entitled to Ksuba of Masai. Correct Gemara, my Hinuma. Rashi told us in the Mishnah, the Gemara is going to explain what a Hinuma is. Surcha bar Papa Mishmei Deziri Amar Tanura Da'asa. It's like an arch of Hadassim. The Kali used to have an arch of Hadassim, and that was an indication that this was a Kala Basula. When you're sitting at a shir, you're sitting at a shir, and you're very, very tired, and you don't want the Maggid shir to see that you're falling asleep, so you put your hands over your eye, you wear sunglasses. This way, when you close your eyes, they don't chap that you're sleeping. So there's another pshat over here what Hinuma is. Surcha bar Papa Mishmei Deziri Amar. It's a tanur. That was the first shot. Rabbi Yochanan Amar. It's karisa the menamnimava kalosa. It's a type of veil head covering that covers the Kala's eyes, so that if she needs to nap, she can close her eyes and nap. Because since her eyes are covered, she can take a nap. If the Kala gets bored during the speeches, she can close her eyes for a minute and take a nap. Rabbi Yochanan ben Beroka said that they used to give out to the children. They used to give out the kloyos. So Tana the Gemara asked, Yehuda Raya. In Yehuda, they used to give out the kloyos, and that was a raya that this woman was a basula. But Bavel Mai, what about a Bavel? Amarav, a very unusual minig. Did you ever wonder why it is that Balabatim come to the Badekim, they come to the Kabbalas Panim, but the Rabbunim always come already right for the Chippah? They usually come in, the Rabbunim are waiting by the Chippah, they don't usually come and sit down by the Kabbalas Panim. I always wanted to know why not. But when I learned this Gemara, I know why the Rabbunim don't like coming to Kabbalas Panim. Because what was one of the Simonim that the Kala was a Basula? The Arduge de Moshcha are Resha de Rabbanim. The women would smear oil on the hair of the Rabbanim. They would grease their hair. That's a Modna Maimid. The women would come and put grease on the head of the Rabbanim. So I'm assuming they usually took it from the herring on the table, or maybe from the kishka on the table. So that's why Rabbanim probably were afraid to come to Kabbalas Punim, because the last thing they wanted was the herring oil smeared on their head, or the kishka oil smeared on their heads. But that's what they used to do. Now, before you bring down what's happens oil, it's because and then it says oil on the head represents brothers together. So we're talking about here the Nuchas and Kala, the new poor folk should be very happy together. So do you mean this special type of oil that makes it smell good? I mean, I don't understand. That wouldn't be a good simon, because if anyone sees someone walking around at the chasna with greased oil, it smells good to the greased hair, they're going to think she's a bzula, and that's not true. Amrlei Yasma, what are you, a Yosy? You weren't there by your chasna. Your mother didn't smear oil on the heads of the Talmidei Chacham. So it's not the fact that there's oil on their heads. That's not the simon that the Kala is a basula. It's the action, it's the ceremony. When they see women pouring oil on the heads of the men and smearing on the heads of the men, that's a very modern thing to see. That stands out. That's a sign that the Kala is a basula, not just seeing oil on someone's head. Like the story there was somebody who was becoming an Edim, his son was becoming an Edim by Rabbi Bar Ula. He was doing a shidduch with Rabbi Bar Ula's daughter. It was Rabbi Bar Ula, Rabbi Bar Ula's son was becoming an Edim by one of the Rabbanim. And what they did there was, they put oil on the Rabbanim's head to show that this woman is a Besula. What do you do for an almana to show that she's an almana? If you need to show that she's an almana, we learned yesterday that there was if a woman could chap, she could be typhus Messiah even though she's an almana. There was no chavis stuma in front of her. She'll say it's because it was honest. They got sicker. They didn't put it out. So we need a positive simon to show that she's an almana. So Amal Samai, Tani Rabbi Yosef, Amalasa less lakisni. They were mocked with never ever to give out kloyos, never by almana. So therefore, that would be a good sign If there was no close given out, that's a very good sign that the kala would have been an alma. So now we're getting back to Lumbus. Rabbi Yeshua didn't hold of Migui, we learned. A woman wouldn't be believed to say, believe me, that my child is from an Adam Kosher, Migui, I could have said, Lo Nevelti. He doesn't hold it on Migui. But in a case where someone says, this field was your father's, and I bought it from him, there he doesn't need to bring a raya that he bought it from him, because a pesh also a pesh iter. It's what we call the super migui. He didn't have to say anything. But if they were aiding that this field belonged to the father, then he needs to bring a raya that he bought the field. Otherwise, he has to give the field back. Zok to confront the Gemara. Why did the Mishnah speak about a case where the field belonged to his father? Why are we mixing in another generation if the halacha of the Mishnah could even be said with one generation? For listening, Rabbi Yeshua, that's the case that Rabbi Yeshua could have said. If I was moed that this field is yours and I bought it from you, there you say, Apesha also, Apesha hit there. Whatever was your father's. So Dr. Gemara, because there's a Zaydik halacha that the Tana wanted to teach us that would have only been a Geya when you're talking about the second generation. Dr. Gemara, because the Tana speaks in the Sefer. If there are Edom, that in fact the field did belong to him, and then you tell I bought it, then so what exactly was the case? What exactly was the case that I said I bought it and I can't prove it? If the buyer already had it for 3 years and the seller was not moiche, why wouldn't the buyer be believed? He had it for 3 years, he had a chazaka, and there was no macha. Now it's important to understand how chazaka and macha works. The buyer does not want to be troubled to hold on to his star forever and ever. It's difficult. So the rule is, if for 3 years nobody was ma'arer, nobody made a claim against his field, then he's allowed to get rid of his star. He doesn't have to hold on to it anymore. And if you come standing later, it's my field, and if you say you bought it, prove it to me, show me your star, he can say, I don't have to show you my star, because I'm not mukhiyib to hold on to my star longer than 3 years. And being that I'm in this field for 3 years already, I don't have to show you a star. So the Gemara asks, in this case, if he already had it for 3 years, I might let him have it. And if he didn't use it for 3 years yet, she did lie him. It's partial he's not believed. So what in the world do I need? What do I need a chiddush of the Mishnah? But the problem here is, if this is the Mishnah's halacha that is teaching me about chazaka, well then why do we need this to be a case of the father? It could be either a case of the son. You have the same time. So I'll tell you why it had to be b'dafka case of 2 generations. You have a case that would be a chiddush. And what would the chiddush be? A person bought karka from somebody, and this person died 2 years later. So for 2 years he had a chazak. And now there was a minor son, a cotton, who survived. And the 3rd year of the chazaka was in the life of the son who was a cotton. And that 3rd year is not going to be a chazaka. That's what our mission is telling us. And Rabbi Huna also told us the same thing. You cannot ever make a chazaka in the nechasim of a cotton, because a cotton doesn't know to be moicha. And afilu higdol, even if the cotton became a gadol, so you could say, well, now that he's a gadol, if I held for 3 years after he became a gadol, that should be a chazaka. That's not either a chazaka, because since the child saw before he became a gadol, this person held on to the land, he had no reason to assume it was his land. He may have only found out years later, in fact, that he has a claim to the land. So therefore, in such a case, it wouldn't be a chazaka. And that's what the Mishnah is telling us. And Dibalt, we're talking about the chazaka of a child on a father's sale. That's why you have to have a case of a father and a son. Zok the Gemara, but if that's the halacha that our Mishnah is telling us, why does Rav Huna need to tell us a halacha that the Mishnah is telling us? For Rav Huna masnizin also lashminan. Are you telling me that Rav Huna is telling me a Mishnah? Zok Gemara, no. Either you can say that it's not meforsh in our Mishnah, this halacha, you have to be medayik from the Mishnah, that if it was such a case, it wouldn't be a good chazak. So Rav Huna helped us understand the Mishnah. Rav Huna taught us the Mishnah, and he told us clear what the case is. From our Mishnah, you just see that the chazaka of the nechasim of the cotton doesn't work. But how do you know that even if he grew up, even then it's not a good chazaka? That is the chiddush Rav Huna says in addition to the Mishnah. I have another hechatimtza where you have 2 years of chazaka and the third year wasn't good, without having another generation. 2 years the seller was there and he wasn't moicher, but on the third year the moicher went away. He left town, and the owner ran away. So since the owner ran away, the third year is not a good chazaka because he can't be moicher if he's not there. Let's ask some questions. Why did this fellow run away? Either Baruch Machmas Nefashos, if he ran away because the government wanted him to kill him, so he has to run away and he can't even send a message back remotely to the Moicha because he doesn't even want the government to be able to know where he is and maybe get him extradited. So he couldn't be Moicha. So Pshitid Lo Mehemet, that's no longer a good chazaka. Why is it not a good chazaka? Because the third year was not really a year where the buyer can say he wasn't Moicha, because he couldn't have been Moicha. And if he ran away only because he owed people money and he couldn't pay back, well, then he boiled him. Then remotely, wherever he was, he could have been moicha there. And Rashi's chaber chisle, the message would have got back to the city where the property was, and that would have sent a message to the buyer that he needs to hold on to his star. The Karmelon we learned, even if this fellow, the original owner, is moicha, and he's in a different city, the macha would work. The Tanan we learned, Sholosh arches l'chazaka. When it comes to chazaka, there's 3 countries that are independent of one another. Yehuda, ve'ever hayarden, v'galil. So Yehuda is the southern part of Eretz Yisrael. Galil is the northern part of Eretz Yisrael. And Ever Yarden is the east bank. Now, what happens if Hayar Yehuda? What if the seller was in Yehuda, the Hechzik b'Galil, but the field that someone bought is in Galil? Or b'Galil v'Hechzik b'Yehuda? Ain't a chazaka. It's not a chazaka. Meaning, even though there was no macha, it doesn't matter because a person couldn't have been moicha from a different country. Until he's in the same country. And the Gemara asked on this price, on this Mishnah, I don't understand. If you could be moicha in a different place and you assume the message will get back to the city of the field, which will warn the buyer to hold on to his star. What's the difference if it's a different country? The message will still get over there. Because and if it's not a good macha, it won't get back. Well, then I feel even if it's in a different city. It shouldn't be a good macha. Really, you could be moicha from a different place. So why can't you be moicha from Yehuda to Galil? The Mishnah was when the countries were fighting. Then messages aren't going to get across the border because people aren't traveling back and forth. So there wouldn't be a good macha. So in such a case where the message won't go, the chazak is not a good chazak those years because those years they couldn't have had a macha, and therefore the chazaka wouldn't be complete until there's 3 years where there could have been a macha, yet there wasn't. Only then does the buyer have a right to destroy his star. Okay, we will stop here, B'ezras Hashem, and we will continue tomorrow.